Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us Across the Fence. I'm Fran Stoddard. The Center for Disease Control estimates that each year 48 million people in the United States get sick from foodborne illnesses. That's a key reason why the Food Safety Modernization Act was signed into law. The law subjects produce farms of all sizes to regulatory oversight related to food safety. But as Vermont's small farmers are learning, there's room for innovative solutions to improve food safety and farm viability. We begin with a case study in Moncton, where just meeting the standard isn't enough when it comes to protecting the food we eat. Here's Across the Fence's Keith Silva.
New Leaf Organics in Moncton is typical of a Vermont hill farm.
There's not much flat ground. It's all super hilly and really hard to access.
The old dairy barn at the bottom of the hill is part of an agricultural past that owner Jill Capel sees as the centerpiece of her farm's future.
The health of the barn was really important to me because it's one of our biggest assets on this property.
Capel grows certified organic vegetables, small fruits, and cut flowers on 5 acres. She sells her produce through farmers markets, co-ops, and an on-farm CSA. The flowers are used for wedding and event planning. For years, she had used a porch alongside the barn or on the top floor for washing and packing. This setup was more about making do and never intended to be permanent.
We kind of reached that point where we were just ready for an upgrade as far as our wash pack went. I just was kind of done using what we had had for a long time, and we had this unused space down below our barn, and I was visiting another farm and saw what they had been working on at their place, and I was getting all excited about what the potential was here. So rather than me having to learn all of that stuff, I knew what I wanted the result to be, but I didn't want to spend a ton of time thinking about the logistics and the mechanics of it all. I wanted to just have somebody who knew what they were doing come look at my space, help me figure out the flow and what might work the best.
Enter University of Vermont Extension.
So it looks a lot different than it did last winter.
Andy Chamberlin works as a technician for Extension's agricultural engineering. This barn renovation is one of his recent projects.
My first reaction when walking into the space was like, yeah, it's an old dairy barn like you'd expect to see on many farms. You know, it's dirty with flaky paint and cobwebs and things like that. So it's definitely come a long ways, and you have to put on the right glasses in order to say, okay, I see this existing space now. How do I clean it up and make it really usable for today's needs?
There was nothing unsafe or unsanitary about how Capel was washing and storing crops before the renovation. But it wasn't ideal either.
I'd say it's pretty typical, yeah, and there's not anything wrong with it, as long as you keep your tubs clean and it's organized and your crew doesn't mind working outside. What can be wrong with it is that you're working on uneven surfaces, and oftentimes you're standing in wet locations because you're hosing things off, so you're tracking mud around while you're trying to keep both your tubs and your vegetables clean.
Capel's old wash pack facility was also bumping up against the guidelines set by the FDA's Food Safety Modernization Act, or FSMA. The law sets standards for food safety that aim to prevent foodborne illness rather than reacting after an outbreak occurs.
So it's part of being what I would call a sustainable farm now.
Hans Estrin is the produce safety specialist with UVM Extension. He coordinates CAPS, short for Community Accreditation for Produce Safety. It's a voluntary program offered by the Vermont Vegetable and Berry Growers Association in collaboration with Extension. CAPS helps small and medium-scale farmers adopt best practices that comply with FSMA.
So the Community Accreditation for Produce Safety, this whole concept came out of this practical approach to produce safety. Growers come to a situation, they have a market, they are running their farm, and our premise is that they're in the best position to put on risk management glasses, look at their operation, see where there are red flags, and figure out a way to reduce them. We align those with FSMA, the standards of FSMA. They are just lined right up in the categories and the standards.
Working with educators and peers to be in compliance with state and federal regulations is one thing. Paying to upgrade a facility is another. The cost of Capel's project was $90,000. To help offset that amount, she received a $5,000 Vermont Produce Safety Improvement Grant from the Vermont Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets.
The Vermont Produce Safety Improvement Grant Program was designed to help produce growers make on-farm produce safety improvements and to help them transition to compliance with the produce safety rule or meet market demands for food safety. So it's kind of all those facets together is what kind of brought that program to its start. And to date we've had 3 rounds of funding and have funded 29 Vermont farms, so we hope to keep it going.
Capel and her crew have been working in this space for a few months. Even in that short time, she's already seeing more potential for this new old space.
It's just made such an improvement as far as our work setup goes and just the comfort level and just having space where we're not on top of each other or, multiple people can work in the same zone at the same time. Everything's movable, nothing's fixed to the wall except for the sink so that we can grow and shrink. I can see the potential for us to just keep tweaking and seeing what works for us and what doesn't.
This project at New Leaf Organics shows what can happen when educators, state officials, and farmers work together. Typical for a hill farm or any farm in Vermont. In Moncton, I'm Keith Silva with Across the Fence.
Such a beautiful space. So to date, the Vermont Produce Safety Improvement Grant Program has awarded $208,000 in grants to 30 Vermont farms. And joining me now are Chris Callahan, the leader of UVM Extension's Agricultural Engineering Team, and Christina Sweet, the Produce Program Manager with the Vermont Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets. Welcome. And thank you for coming here and adding a little bit to that wonderful video. So Christina, you're the regulator here, so we'll start with you about how the Agency of Agriculture is approaching enforcing the Food Safety Modernization Act.
So similar to what you heard in the video in terms of the Produce Safety Improvement Grants, we're really about promoting the safe production of fruits and vegetables as well as compliance with the produce safety rule. And so that approach is really founded in this idea of educating before and while we regulate so people know about best practices as well as what they need to do to be in compliance.
Right. And Chris, how do these regulation laws, and laws translate into the real world and on the farm?
Yeah, I think the video of Jill's renovation is a good example. It's a shining example in some ways.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily need to be that involved or complex. Sometimes it's really just sharpening up the crew training, worker training on the farm to really help to reinforce the culture of food safety and produce safety on the farm. And it might even just be improving documentation, things that are already being done, but making sure there's a good record of that so that when there is an inspection or a review, that it's clear.
And inspections are starting.
They are,
They're actually happening. So many of the changes to food safety are also benefits to farm workers, of course. So Christina, could you talk about how food safety relates also to improved working conditions on a farm?
Definitely. I mean, some of the most basic practices in food safety are things like making sure that you have bathrooms available to your staff and places for them to wash their hands. Some of the kind of next level improvements to food safety that we've seen people implement with the Produce Safety Improvement Grants are really about efficiency and flow, so it makes a more positive working environment that is both more efficient and easy, a space that's easier to move around in for your employees.
Fantastic. And so Chris, when you meet with farmers on site to assess their current situation and what they might need to do, how much is really meeting about regulations and how much is kind of meeting the farmers where they're at the moment?
It's a great balance of both. Because clearly there are, the reality is where the farmers are, but it's also the regulatory compliance.
Sure.
And so really it's also important to remember this is about near term and long term and continuous improvement. So it's understanding what needs to be done, understanding the risks, and making a plan. What can be done today?
Right.
What might be done next year?
Right. Because even in Moncton, that was, she could have kept it outside.
Right.
But, wow, how wonderful it is to really move that in.
And great opportunity to have the educational program in place, the technical assistance program, funding, and regulatory support
Right.
to make it happen.
Okay. And, you know, Christina, we want to make sure in the video we heard about these grants, the Produce Safety Improvement Grants. So when is the next time that farmers can apply for something like that?
Farmers can look for the next request for applications in early November, and they'll have about until mid-December to apply, and then they can hopefully be implementing their projects early in 2020.
Wow, that's terrific. So talk about, you know, this is the kind of thing where it's just ongoing. It's, you know, it's rinse and repeat and rinse and repeat. Let's keep going. Can never really completely be done. It seems that it would be daunting, not only for you as instructors and regulators, and also for the farmers. So how do you balance that? How do you go about that?
I think the one thing we have going for us as a community in that regard is that sort of seasonal continuous improvement mentality is already there. Growers are already focused on quality, yield, profitability improvements. This is another component of that same culture.
Right.
So it is something that is already in place. It's sort of pivoting a little bit and saying, let's also think about some of these other ways of measuring quality through safety. So.
Okay. And it seems that these inspections are ongoing. So how do people learn about that? I think you were saying earlier, 10 have happened or something, or 10 are going to happen this year? How does that all work?
10 inspections so far this year, and so the entire country is conducting inspections on a tiered basis depending on the size of the farm. So it's a relatively small number of farms that are undergoing inspection this year, and our inspectors at the Agency of Agriculture are calling the farms in advance to find a date that works both for the agency and for the farmer.
Okay,
and
so
they are aware of it in advance.
And they would know in advance. Chris from UVM Extension and Christina from the State Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets, thank you so much for coming in. I'm sure that people can learn more, and if you're looking to learn more, the best way to learn about these programs and everything that we've discussed today is the UVM Extension Produce Safety Portal. The web address is on your screen, or you can call 802-257-7967. That's 257-7967. Thank you so much for joining us, all of you.
Thank you, Fran.
And thank you for joining us across the fence. I'm Fran Stoddard.